Hi guys! The topic of this tutorial is to create eyebrows for this 3D model, and I used Yeti for Maya for creating this, and I was quite pleased by the results, so I wanted to share with you the workflow I used. And this will be a two-part tutorial. So the first part will be for creating the groom for this and also the Yeti graph. And in the second part, I will import the groom into the final scene and adding final touches. This is the model I'm going to use for creating eyebrows. And what I did is I extracted faces just where I need to create those eyebrows. And I'm going to hide this model and show what I've done. Okay. And as you can see, I projected this photo I found on internet, which is pretty nice reference, I believe. So from there, I'm going to create a Yeti node and a Yeti groom. So I select the mesh and I create groom on mesh. And for now, that's it. I'm going to create this Yeti node later on. And I'm going to rename this as groom eyebrows. So the third thing that you can see here on the attribute editor are the brushes for your groom. So you can have this plus, which is add brush. So you add curves onto your mesh, or you can delete them, or you can use this scatter brush. And here you have your initial strand length. Right now it's set to 1. You can set to whatever length, and it's based on the Maya world unit. And also, just because I removed one of my eyebrows, some hair, and I took a picture of those, and as you can see, it's laid on a sheet of paper, and 1 square equal half a centimeter. So I know that when I lay in this strand, it's about 3 squares, and which is about 1.5 centimeters. So because this is set to Maya world unit, I just need to tap 1.5 for 1.5 centimeters, because my settings here in Maya are set to centimeters. So 1 grid equal 1 centimeter. So let's remove those curves. And oh no, let me show you what we can do actually. So now you can see that my curves are longer. And here you have a comb brush that you can set the radius by hitting the B key on your keyboard and dragging your mouse. And you can comb your guide curves the way you want. Or you can smooth them, or you can lift them, or you can move them around, or you can increase or decrease the size of your curves. Let's say if you want to decrease the size, your brush strength here needs to be below 1, but be careful because this value here is really sensitive. Must be just like 9.9 something in order to be useful. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare. and just above 1 to increase their size up, just like that. You can see it's very, very sensitive. So that is that, and you also have the ability to use this sculpt tool. As you can see, you can sculpt all your curves, just nice and smooth like this. Or you can use the trim brush. Like that. Alright. You also have this clump brush. And you have, what else? Twist. Never using this, but it's there. I think it can be very useful actually. And what else you have? Oh yeah, let's get new ones. And let me show you the comb brush and what you can get with that. So for instance, if I combing my hair like this, I give them a direction and you can see they bent toward this direction. But let's undo that. If I set my brush fall off power, and that's very important to use when you're using some of the brushes, you can either have a higher fall off power. Let's say if I set it to 5, it's going to bend my curves, but more toward the top of the curves, like the tip will bend instead of the roots. And if I want to bend them more toward the roots, then you need to decrease this value, just like that. So yeah, very interesting to get some sort of effects. Right. So now what I want to do is to create those curves, and I'm going to set the length segment to something like 0.05, and I'm also going to set my minimum strand distance, which is the distance between each of the strands created. If I set it like this, a very small number, I will have lots of density going on, but I want to have less density right now, and I'm going to set this probably to 1, and let's see what we get. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I'm going to brush many curves and follow the reference, just like that. Right? Actually, I can have more fibers here, because I can see, if I look closely, I can see there are fibers here. So I want them to be created. And they will be short anyway. Like that. Maybe a few more here. And a few more here. Right, now it's time to comb them. Oh no, actually, before coming down, I'm going to decrease the size of the outer edge, because again, if we look at this reference, we can see that those hairs are shorter than the one in the middle. You can see that they are short here, very short hair. So I'm going to use this scale brush here with again a value below 1, probably something like this. And now I can decrease the size of those strands. Okay, now I can use this comb brush to brush them down, just like that. Oops, nope, not with this fall off. One will be good for now. So I'm using large stroke. And then the top are going inward and the bottom as well. So they meet somewhere in the middle. All right. And when this is done, I can just remove this texture. Don't need that anymore. And what I like to do is using the component mode. By pressing the F key, you can enter this component mode and select all the tips and move them around like this if you want to. So instead of having straight strands like this, I want to curve them inward like this. And the idea is to keep some sort of volume, because rarely eyebrows are totally flat on the skin. They are just like that. Well, it depends of the people, but that's good for now. And I think it's time to create now the Yeti node. So I select the mesh and I'm going to create Yeti node on mesh. Rename this node eyebrows Yeti Yeto. And now you can open your graph. So what you want to do now is importing the mesh inside your graph and your groom as well. So for that you need to create two nodes, and those one are import nodes. And of course, almost forgot, but you need to import this groom here on your graph first. Input groom, and you add your groom here. That's the first step. No need to do that for your input object, it's already there because we've selected our mesh in the beginning. So now you can double click to open this node inspector, rename that as import geo, for example, set this to geometry and select your mesh here. And the second one will be for importing our groom. And I set that to groom, so I can find it. Why it's not there? Strange. Did I do something wrong? Oh. Okay, I need to add it here. I thought I did it. Sorry about that. And now I can find it here. So now you have your mesh, you have your groom, and we are going to build the graph. So usually what you do is that you select your mesh import and you create one scatter, one grow node, and one countdown. So the scatter points on your model like this, and you can set the density, multiplier, you can set the distribution to relax that, and you can set your seeds as well. Then after that, it grows fibers onto those points, just like that. And then after, you should be able to comb your fibers, and they will follow the curves. But before that, you need to make sure that you connect your groom into the second input of the grow node, so they share the same length, like that, and connect as well this groom to the second input of the comb node, like this. And you should have something like this. And of course you go to your groom node here, and in the parameters you can change the radius of influence so it doesn't grow everywhere on your mesh. It grows like this. So this is how you can start creating your fibers. But for eyebrows, what I like to do usually is having exactly the same number of fibers as the curves that I've created. So instead of using this tree that I've just did right now, I'm just going to put him down, and I'm going to create something else, which is a convert node. And this is this one here. And I'm going to connect the groom into the first input and the geometry into the second, and highlight this node So now, as you can see, all my guide curves are converted into fibers, and now they can be rendered out. So I could use those ones, or I could use those ones. So I'm not deleting this tree because I'm going to use this one for clumping in a few moments. But right now we're just focusing on this. And maybe we can try to render this. So I need to, I've already created an area light. And let's render that. Let's see how it looks like. Okay. So we can see different things, like how the fibers looks like. Now they looks flat, and that's because they are rendered with this ribbon turn on. So what I want to do is going to my main Yeti node, and in the extra attributes I look for this AI mode, and instead of rendered in ribbon, I want them to be rendered as thick. And now if I render that, you will see that it's going to be totally different. It looks like tubes now instead of flat surface. You can see the difference. Right, I can disconnect the texture. And I'm going to set a color for my mesh, like that. And I've already created a standard surface. And I'm going to connect it to my Yeti node. So what we need to do now is to set the width of our fibers. And for that, again, I'm going to use this reference. So I'm opening my graph editor again, and I'm going to create this node, which is a width node. Double click that to open the node inspector, and I want my tips to be really thin, something like that. And I don't see anything because the flag is not set correctly. So now you can see how it looks like. It's pretty crazy, right? So I need to decrease this multiplier. And because when you look closely this reference, we can see that the width is pretty much the same all the way to the end, except at the very end where it starts to thin down. And for doing that, I just need to change this base parameter. And as you can see, let's try to focus more on some of those fibers. Yeah, so you can see if I change this base parameter, you can see where my fibers start to thin down, and that's probably about there. And of course this need to be decreased as well, something like this. So let's try to render this just like that. And I'm going to, for a second, I'm going to lock the camera. Let's try to render that. it's too thick, so I'm going to change that, and probably instead of 0.04 I'm going to put like 0.202. And let's try that now. Yeah, I think it looks much better. So alright. So what I want to do now is changing those small hair to be thinner than the one in the middle. And for doing that, I'm going to do two things. Probably I'm going to change the viewport width displayed to something like 3. So 3, so I can see better. It's not going to change the render. It's just for my viewport. And also I need to select my groom, right? And I'm going to show my attribute pen display. So actually what it does, it shows you the roots of each of your curves, and we can decrease the size of this like this and display it as a heat map because I prefer that. And what we need to do is to create an attribute paint. So we add an attribute and name it as you want. I'm going to call it thickness. I copy this name, Control C, and I double click this. Well, first I need to select my Yeti node, right? Open a graph editor, and here, just before my width, because I'm going to affect the width multiplier with this attribute. So somewhere in the graph, but before that, I need to create an attribute node, and we are going to call the attribute that we've just created. So we are going to sample it from the groom, and so we need to connect the groom into the second input. Double click this and set the name for this attribute. It can be whatever you want, but I'm going to use the same name as the one we've just created, sample groom, and here it has to be the name that you set earlier, thickness, like that. So now I can multiply this width multiplier by the name of this attribute time thickness. Nothing happens yet. That's because we didn't paint anything, but if I select my groom and double click the thickness, the mode needs to be set to set, and here you can change the value. By default the value is 1, that's why multiplying by 1 didn't change anything. So if I set it to 2 now and I paint these ones, you can see now they get bigger. Of course I don't want them to be bigger, but I want them to be smaller, and so I will probably get a value of 0.1 or 2. Let's try 2, and now you can see they get really thin, really thin. And again, I want just to change the one that are on the outside. like that. So if I render this, now you can see what's going on. So it will give us a much more natural look. Okay, no need to wait for that. And what I can do is set my mode to smooth. I can double click this thickness and probably decrease the strength of this brush, and I can smooth these attributes. Or something like this. All right. So now I can just remove the display of this. And I'm going to create more fibers. So what I need to do is just add more curves. And I'm going to decrease the minimum strand distance to 0.05. That here, and of course make sure you check this conform new strands. That means instead of growing like straight strands, they will conform to the surrounding and the existing curves like this. So now you can create lots of them. Let's save this. I think it's getting interesting, but all the fibers are too straight, so now we probably want to get some sort of variation and probably clamping as well. Select this camera and I'm going to select this and open the graph editor, and now we can start having fun. So what I want to do is adding a clamp node here, actually, and I'm going to use this tree that we've created in the beginning, and we are going to connect this tree to the second input of the clamp. So now that all the fibers, I'm sorry, let's hide this groom, and let's change some values for the clamping. So usually I don't like to clamp the base for that, so I remove the clamping for the base. And I also want to remove this maintain length. That's just because trying to maintain the length bends the fibers, and we get this strange effects going on. So as soon as I uncheck that, it's going to be better, actually. And we can also change this scatter density to have different effects for our clamps. The lower density you have, the bigger your clamps will be. I hope you can see something. Okay, so here you are. And we can also change the seeds, something like that. Not too bad. And what we can do now also to give some nice variation is to add a squiggle node just after the second tree here. So I highlight this comb node and I click squiggle, open the attribute for this, and I can change the frequency of this or the strength like this. So probably a low frequency is nicer than a big frequency because it can get crazy. Something like that can be more natural. And we can also create another squiggle node, but just after the clamping now. So here it is. And for this one, I'm going to remove this squiggle on the roots. I'm going to increase, at least for now, to see the effect, and probably change also the frequency. All right. And I'm going to decrease the percentage. So we can have 100% or 0%. And I want something probably there. Looks good. And now we can have a look. Let's compare this with the previous one. So much better. All right. So what I want to try to do is change the position of this eyebrow, because I think it's a bit too high, especially here. So I'm going to use this move brush, and I'm going to decrease the strength and increase this brush softness. And I'm going to try to slide those curves like that. Something like this. I think it's better. So I want to brush my eyebrows because I move them around, they probably shifted a bit. So I'm trying to get something different. And you can always change any curves, anything, which is very good. Right. Okay, let's compare this with the previous one again. So this is much better. Right. So that's it for this grooming part. Now we are going to save the groom, and we can always import this groom that we've created for our final mesh, and we will be creating the shader for that. So I need to select the Yeti node, and in the Yeti menu I will export groom from selected Yeti node, set the name here and save it. Yes. And before wrapping up this first part of this tutorial, I forgot to mention something quite important actually, and it's concerning this scatter node that we used for the clump. And the thing is, I didn't lock the density, which is not good because I don't get exactly what I've got on my display. And the reason for that is that because you can see on this render here, you have render density that is multiplied by 10. And actually, if I multiply by 10 here, this is what I get. So it's different. So that means that this density here will be much higher. And let me show you exactly. If we were to render this part, let's look at this. You can see I have lots of hair rendered. But if I lock the density, I will have the exactly same number of fibers that I can see here. Just like that. So when using this kind of tree to create clumps, make sure that you lock density so that you have exactly what you're supposed to have at the end. So this is that. Let's probably change this multiplier then, because I want to get a better result. Somewhere around here looks good. And let's try that. Well, at least we have exactly the same thing as we have on our display. But I'm going to change some of the parameters because it doesn't look quite right for me now. So maybe I'm going to change the randomness or the weight of this clump. Yeah, and probably I have too much quaggle going on here, especially on the roots. So I want to remove that as well. And let's try this. Yeah, all right, it's not too bad. We're going to leave this like this for now. And I'm going to export this groom one more time. Thanks for watching. And if you think that you've learned something or you like this video, please hit the like button. I would appreciate. And See you for the second part of this tutorial. Bye guys.